Bennett Kessler filed the following report. Sunday afternoon before 1 o'clock, a call came into the Inyo County Sheriff's Office. A neighbor had discovered a man and a woman dead in their bed at a home on Paha Lane in Bishop. Inyo County Sheriff Bill Lutz said that the male and female were in their late teens or 20s. He said there was no obvious sign of trauma, no gunshot wounds or other signs of violent death. Inyo County Coroner Leon Bruni has released the names of the deceased. He did that today, and they are Helena Spratt, age 18, and Chase Tague, age 27, both of Bishop. Sheriff Lutz said, quote, "A young person tried to wake them up and couldn't," end quote. The call came to the sheriff's office, happened around 12:40 p.m. Sunday. Officers and investigators from the Sheriff's Department and Inyo County District Attorney's Office responded to the scene. The sheriff's ID team also went to work on the case. An autopsy will take place to determine the cause of the death. The sheriff said that the investigation will take some time. Asked what the relationship was between the deceased man and woman, Sheriff Lutz said at the time it was unknown. Monday, Sheriff Lutz said this is a tragic event for the families of the deceased and the community. Anyone, he said, with any information is asked to please come forward, and you may stay anonymous. Now, at the scene Sunday afternoon, the California Highway Patrol had closed off Paha Lane. Crime scene tape surrounded the house where the couple was found. Officers said family members and others who gathered outside on the street were obviously distraught. Rumors that there is a third victim are not true, according to the Inyo County Sheriff's Office, and the investigation into these deaths continues. Well, Bennett Kessler also filed this report. The stark difference in wildlife management styles continues, with the California Department of Fish and Game on one side and the Mammoth Lakes community and Steve Searles on the other. The two sides differ on exactly what was said and what should have been done, but the truth remains that a mother bear was killed in traffic over the weekend in Mammoth, and her two cubs were left on their own to survive. Searles and Mammoth police say the cubs will die unless rescued. Now, although the Bishop Office of Fish and Game refuses to communicate, Andrew Huon of Fish and Game Public Information in Sacramento has consistently helped with news in the Eastern Sierra. Now, Huon responded to Sierra Wave Media's Bennett Kessler's request for Fish and Game side of the incident. Now, reports from the scene of the dead sow and the live cubs in Mammoth said that Fish and Game Warden William Witzel communicated that the cubs could starve and be eaten by coyotes. Huon said, quote, "No game warden would say that." Mammoth Police Officer Luke Schwarzkopf said that both sides understood that this would be the fate of the cubs if they were left on their own. Now, Huon said the cubs were 40 pounds and, quote, more than 6 or 7 months old, end quote. Now, he said it is the California Department of Fish and Game policy not to rescue these cubs. Huon said, quote, "The cubs were not dependent on the sow," end quote, and so should not be rescued. However, both Steve Searles and Officer Schwarzkopf said the cubs were dependent on their mother, who was clearly lactating. The men said this was obvious when they saw the dead sow. Now, Searles said, quote, "There is no possibility of survival of the cubs this winter. They were dependent on the lactating sow," end quote. He said the 7-month-old cubs weighed 18 to 20 pounds. He said the cubs' need for their mother's milk was discussed in the group, including Fish and Game. Now, Searles said the point of the problem was, quote, "We could have controlled the situation, put the cubs in a cage, and examined options to save them," end quote. Now, Searles had contacted the Tahoe Bear Rescue Group, which did agree to take the cubs. Mr. Huon of Fish and Game said, quote, "There is no reason to put the cubs in rehab. Their chances of survival are very good," end quote. Huon stood by Warden Witzel's decision. He said his understanding of the policy was clear. He talked to the lieutenant, end quote. Now, Huon said putting an animal in rehab is a bad thing. He said the warden put the cubs in the woods and checked on them. They are fine, Huon said. Now, Mammoth Police and Searles strongly maintain that the cubs will not make it through the winter and could have been saved. Now, the Fish and Game policy says orphaned cubs dependent on their mother are candidates for rehabilitation and would be caught, cared for, and released when they are ready. Huon said that it was his understanding that the day of this incident, those gathered never addressed rehab. Now, both Officer Schwarzkopf and Cyril said they did tell Warden Witzel about the Tahoe group that would take the cubs. Schwarzkopf said, quote, "Their policy is to let nature take its course. I understand both sides," end quote. Now, the officer, Cyril's, and countless residents of Mammoth Lakes apparently are standing on the side of the protection of the animals. Schwarzkopf said all involved understood, quote, there would not be a good outcome for the cubs, end quote. Now, this afternoon, Mammoth Police Chief Dan Watson said that DFG wildlife biologist Tim Taylor is on his way to the Eastern Sierra to assess the bear cubs and, quote, determine if they can make it on their own, end quote. Chief Watson said, it's Fish and Game's call. We know where the cubs are, end quote. Now, Watson also said that he was not there during the cub incident. Watson said, quote, I have a lot of confidence in Officer Schwarzkopf and Steve Searles regarding the size of the cubs and whether they will make it, end quote. The chief repeated that he is aware DFG has the authority to make the determination. Well, Bennett Kessler also filed this report. As Mammoth residents wonder how their town services will change in the face of a $29.5 million debt payoff, members of the Mammoth Lakes Town Council and other officials will come up with some government restructuring plans that they say will lead to the ability to pay Mammoth Lakes Land Acquisition $2 million per year for 23 years. Now, that plan may go public at the town council meeting that is set for Thursday night at 6 p.m. And we just got word this afternoon that another closed session of the Mammoth Lakes Town Council will take place on Tuesday, and that appears to deal with labor negotiations. Now, as Sierra Wave Media reported last Friday, the town of Mammoth Lakes announced details of the settlement with Mammoth Lakes Land Acquisition and Terry Ballas, and that was the result of that 2006 $30 million court judgment for breach of the Hot Creek Development Agreement. Now, the debt grew to $43 million as the town of Mammoth Lakes appealed the decision, paid attorney's fees, and negotiated with MLLA. Now, under a bankruptcy court ordered mediation, the adversaries reached a deal. Now, in a closed session last week, the town council voted on the proposed settlement. The vote was 4-1, with Councilman Michael Raimondo voting no. Sierra Wave Media's Bennett Kessler called Raimondo, who said he was on vacation in Mexico. Now, of his vote, Raimondo said, quote, I just don't think the deal is in the best interest of the community, end quote. Raimondo says he thinks Mammoth would have done better if the town had gone through with bankruptcy. Raimondo said he thinks the town should have gathered better information about risks and a path of action before going to bankruptcy court. Raimondo also said he doesn't believe a bankruptcy judge would, quote, punish a little town in the Sierra, end quote, to benefit wealthy Los Angeles businessmen. Raimondo also said that there is a concern that the town can't afford the payments. Now, when contacted for more information on the settlement, Councilman Rick Wood told Sierra Wave Media that the deal does have to be approved by bankruptcy court and then sent to state court to amend the writ demanding a $43 million payment to MLLA. Wood says he believes this will happen October 19th. Wood said now it's important to get public participation in the options available to restructure government so the town can pay its debt. Wood said some of the options to reduce costs are outsourcing, restructuring, and generally doing things differently. Again, more information is expected at Thursday night's 6 p.m. Town Council meeting in Suite Z. Now, Mammoth Assistant Town Manager Mariana Marashiva Martinez said there would also be discussions with employee groups to bring them into the discussion about this issue. Now, Councilman Rick Wood said the overall idea is to use this point in time as an opportunity instead of a time of hand-wringing. Wood said, quote, government needs to deliver services more efficiently and effectively, end quote. Now, Wood said he wants to hear the public's priorities and have a debate. He confirmed that everything in town government is, quote, on the table, all ways of doing business, end quote. He noted that that will go from top to bottom, and he says he sees implementation of the restructured government by January 1st, 2013. Now, to those citizens who want to know who to blame and why the horrible debt happened, Councilman Wood said the Mammoth Lakes Town Council will talk about that. He says it's a reasonable and legitimate question by the public. Wood himself will walk through his own chronology. Basically, he said he was not on the council when the key elements of the lawsuit and debt unfolded. Wood also said, quote, "We intend to have our attorneys and, more importantly, the bankruptcy judge mediator tell us by teleconference what she thinks of the deal. It is that mediator who led us to believe that the deal we cut was better than she felt we would do in bankruptcy," end quote. We'll be back with more news.